day for work here at the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. I'm Kimberly Ficklin, your host. And every week we talk to professionals just like you all around the world because we want to find out what they do to create a profitable business, the kind of business where people really want to work. Hello, happy healthy day, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Kimberly Ficklin, and today I'm very excited to have a conversation with Rishita Jones about HR, Agile, and the employee experience. Now, Rishita is an HR transformation specialist. She focuses on disrupting the status quo and intent on building people-centered HR practices using Agile HR, design thinking, and technology to enrich and uplift the human experience in the workplace. Now, before we get started, in an effort to get this important information out to as many workplaces as we can, please, if you love what you hear on this podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate and review us on your favorite podcast player, and share this podcast with anyone that you know who would benefit from it, because Rishita is going to share some really great stuff today. With that said, Rishita, welcome to the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'm very, very happy to be here and to have this conversation with you today.
Me too. I love following you on LinkedIn. You've got some amazing things to say. You're really involved with a lot of great groups that are employee-centric. And so this is going to be a great conversation. I just know it. I'm really excited for it because you and I both work in the Agile arena. And I really want to get more information out to our workplaces about employee-centric cultures and how Agile can play a role in that. So with that said, Rishita, tell us a little more about your specific position as an Agile coach and facilitator. I mean, what does that mean?
So I think the first thing I'd like to highlight is that my background is to really bring Agile and its principles into HR. So Agile is often associated with technology, particularly software development. But for me, what I really do is to bring the mindset and the framework of Agile, which is really putting user centricity at the center of what we do, and bringing that to HR basically. So my ambition and my purpose is to create human-centered enterprises, which put the employees at the center of what we do, and we basically co-create our solutions, our service delivery based on their actual needs and not based on HR individuals sitting in a conference room by themselves, deciding what we want to push out to the business, which is how we've been, working for the past 100 years or more.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Very true. So we work very similarly in that, except for that I use the Scrum process to do the design. That's the design framework that I use, but both Agile. And so what's important here, and what I think is really what I want to dive into and push deep into today, is that employee or user-centric workplace. And why is that important? And what does it look like when somebody like you comes in, rather than imposing their own already existing wellness program, which is what wellness people have been doing forever and ever. Like, I got this great program, blah, and they verbally vomit their program on the workplace, and it really doesn't work, right? So let's talk about, how does this whole Agile process, how does that lend to the employee-centric or user-centric culture in a workplace?
Well, essentially what it is that what the Agile principles, very, very similar to the design principles. What they say is that we need to start from a point of discovery, and we need to start from a point of actually understanding our users and their needs. And that is essentially what I'm doing, within HR. I mean, HR is a strategic business partner, and often is not seen as such. It doesn't sit at the table because it's enabled to many times bring the right information, the right data to the business. And it doesn't, it's not always able to support the employees with what they need. We've offered typically until now a one-size-fits-all approach. And what Agile does is to really sort of breaks that down into identifying the different user needs and ensuring that we're able to cater to them specifically, rather than this one-size-fits-all approach that we've been doing. And the way we do that is by identifying and segmenting our workforce, whether it be it by employee type, be it by, department, business units. It's really identifying, who is working for us, who are the different personas in the business, and what are their needs. And basically having that as our center point, but then also inviting them into these discussions. We often do these engagement surveys once a year, and then we get the results, we put together these action plans, and we sort of send them out back into the business and say, here you go, managers, go and implement it. But the question is, why are we not involving, the same people that we want to increase the engagement for? They're the best people to ask, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I don't remember what episode that I talked about this very static way of gaining data from people, like sending them over a Google form that says, about the survey. You just don't get good information. Number one, people do not believe, employees generally do not believe that anything is anonymous. So when you say it's anonymous and you send out something static, you're really not getting good data. And then people are working off that data set, right? What they think, oh, well, the employee said this or the employee said that, as well as what I've seen is if the employee has any negative things to say, then that those aren't really, they're more taken as that must be in a disgruntled employee, somebody who's not happy with the company or something, right? But so let's talk about the mindset of it, because that's what we really need to focus on here. What is the difference between sending someone a Google form to fill out on a survey and actually bringing a cross-functional team to the table and having conversations about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what happens? Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things that I talk about is the fact that the engagement is really, I wonder sometimes whether the way we currently measure engagement is also what is stopping us from increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Because, they are written, these engagement surveys are written, maybe by an external software provider or vendor, they're very generic in nature, right? They're sent out, like you say, in this very sterile form. If you don't have that representation in the business in itself, you're just only going to get what, you're going to get out what you put in. So if you don't have the representation, you're not suddenly going to receive that, right? So there's lack, you're suddenly just not going to appear from somewhere. Then the other thing is, like you say, people don't feel that there's a trust or that there is any action that's going to come out of it. People are not going to be honest about it. And often, they're not really, when you have feedback that's just sort of one way, you don't really get the depth and the meaning out of it. So the best way and an agile way of doing engagement should be on an ongoing basis. It should belong to the team. It shouldn't really belong at such a high level in the organization, because it's much harder to decipher then and delineate and decide what the specific action points should be. So the moment we take away the engagement from managers and from teams, we're saying kind of it doesn't really belong to you. And actually it does. Engagement belongs with managers, but also amongst the team itself. So it should be done at the team level. So managers themselves there are so many ways of measuring engagement on a daily basis, which is actually in this current environment, that's what should be happening. It could be just a check-in in the day. It could be start a meeting or start the day with a rating from 1 to 5 or a smiley face or just one word. That's getting the daily pulse, the daily engagement. Before I used to say have a happiness sticker on the door, and then people as they leave or they come in, they could kind of put their cross. But we're no longer, in a physical space. So there are ways we can do this also virtually. So own this at the team level. That's, how I think we can really start making changes within engagement in organizations.
Oh, that is good stuff. That is really the crux of it. Because again, if you go once a year with that survey and people are like, whatever, it's not going to make a difference. But when you get asked every day, even just how are you doing? I don't even know. When I was in the workplace, I can't even think of a time when any of my supervisors just with no agenda really wanted to know how I was doing. More it was business oriented. How are you doing in your job? How are you doing with your sales goals? How are you, you know what I mean? But it was never just, hey, Kimberly, oh, I'm so sorry your husband had COVID the last 3 weeks. Yeah. How are you doing? I think that's happening more often, but it's very important for, I think in the workplace now for us to just start thinking about these micro interactions with people and how these micro interactions build up trust over the long term.
I think another thing I have to say about that is also recently I was asked the question. In fact, I asked first. I didn't say, how are you? I said, how have you been? Because it warrants a different response. Because if you say, how are you? Normally people can just sort of brush it off with, yeah, okay, or fine. And, and then it moves on. But actually I made a point of saying, how have you been? Because I really wanted an answer to that, really mentally, emotionally, how are you, And yeah, fine. It's been a bit difficult. Pressure's high, etc. How about you? How have you been? And I actually was honest at that point. And I said, actually not so good. I feel quite a lot of pressure. I'm tired. I have 2 young kids. The pressure of work, also the speed at which things are happening is quite fast. So I'm a little bit tired. And I thought I'm going to be honest about it because actually, I should be. We need to start all being a bit more open and honest with each other so we can support one another better. But the response I received from the other side was sort of a bit of, surprise and, okay, I don't know what to do now. And so this was a manager a leader within an organization. And I think what really I realize is that how are we then supporting our managers to support their employees at this time? Because they have to be able to move past the whole I'm okay or I'm fine to really spot the signs of a struggling employee, and those that are maybe not really opening up. But how can they then at least ensure that their employees or their teams know that they're there should they need to?
That is a very great question. That is so much better. You're right. Because we have gotten to the point where it's easy for us to we're used to not really telling people how we feel. So we're like, oh, I'm fine. I think in the past that people have thought that maybe our emotions, or if we're having a hard time, it's like it puts the other person in a different space, right? So we're afraid to say, oh, I'm not doing so well. Or maybe we're afraid of what the other person might think about us if we are really truthful. But what I do love right now is the amount of transparency that's happening. I mean, just between everybody, it's all over. It's on social media, and you text and you talk to your people and everything. And people are really starting to say, hey, I'm not doing so great. And it's because, Rishita, people like you are getting out and saying it's okay for you to say these things. And here's some better ways to ask the question to get the actual answers that you're looking for. And I love the deep dive question. So that is a great tip for anybody, is to actually do a deeper dive than how are you doing? And get some more information that way. So let's go back to being able to get this information from your employees. We'll go, and let me write this down real quick, a little note about going back to how to support the leaders. Okay. But let's go to back to getting some information about your employees in a way that is more involved than a survey is. Okay. So why don't you talk to us, Rishita, about ways that you work with your clients, or ways that you suggest that, and I'm talking about down to the most micro level of the daily opportunities. And real quick, before I ask the question, the reason why I'm asking is because often people will say, how do I create this culture? And they look at these bigger pictures and they're like, well, I don't know how to create trust in a virtual world. And I'll say, did you create trust when your employees were coming physically to the job? Because if you didn't do it then, you're going to have a harder time doing it virtually. But Rishita, I know you have some tricks here. So talk to our executives and CEOs and leaders that are listening right now about those small micro interactions each day. What do you suggest that they can do?
So one of the things that I do, and I actually encourage every team to do that, is to have a daily check-in and start every meeting with a check-in. And check-in is really just that question, which is, what are you bringing today with you into this meeting, to this conversation, to this interaction? And, by way of doing that, what you're doing is actually sort of saying, okay, I acknowledge you, I acknowledge what you're feeling. Maybe we can put this aside for the duration of this meeting. So it just allows us to focus. It's a moment to ground ourselves. So not everybody is into mindfulness. And not everybody would perhaps feel comfortable if we say, okay, let's take a minute, just to sort of, focus. So there are different ways in asking people to focus and to ground themselves into the moment and to focus on what's ahead of us. That is one simple way. It not only allows you to get sort of the pulse of what your employees are feeling, but it also allows you to all focus on what's at hand. So that's one really good way. One of the things that I used to do also sometimes with my teams at the end of the day is to end the day with a sort of a retrospective, dive back, maybe the week or the day, and talk about what went well, what didn't go so well, what could have gone better. But I always bring the feelings and the emotions into it. And I ask 3 questions: what made me sad, what made me mad, and what made me glad? And I ask my teams to answer these 3 questions. We do it in the chat box. If you have a virtual tool like Mural or Miro, you can do it in one of those. And if you have the trust, perhaps, or the confidence, maybe you can just discuss it. But often it's better to do it in writing, give people some time to think about it and write their answers. Because we also need to consider that we have different types of personalities in a team, and we need to respect that as well. So some may not be so comfortable in saying it out loud. Others may be hijacked at the moment anyway. So perhaps it's better to do it in writing, either in the chat, in the whiteboard, or in a social tool. So that is, I think, one of the best ways to really bring that trust into it, because you also have to be able to put yourself out there. You can't build trust in a team if you don't show the vulnerability first. You've got to give something of yourself if you want others to give something of themselves too. So that is a great way to start the process of trust. And it's also important to understand the difference between trust and psychological safety, because trust happens between 2 people, but psychological safety is what happens between a team. And that's what you want to ultimately also achieve, is trust between your team members, between yourself and your employees. But also then as a team, are you creating that environment, that space which is safe for people to, be who they are, bring their whole selves to work, that encourages that innovation, that creativity, that collaboration, really, which is what every company right now is looking for.
I love the difference between trust and psychological safety. Funny enough, I noticed on LinkedIn, you recently posted a post about psychological safety versus trust. And the funny thing is that I had months before and used the same graphic that you used. I was like, it's such a good graphic, right? Like, it's amazing. And
Yes.
people really don't understand the difference between those two. Psychological safety equals trust. Trust is what is me. Can I trust someone if I put myself out there, right? And psychological safety is, can I trust what's coming back at me? And those two are different, but we tend to use them in the same verbiage. So I really like the fact that you've broken that out for us again, because those types of posts on social media get a lot of interaction because people really didn't realize, they just don't understand the difference. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's something that people in the workforce need to understand, is that you can't really force trust on someone. You can help them have psychological safety, right? Now, with that said, I'm going to go back, because in order to build this psychological safety, I love, it's always like this big round come back to it, right? I'm going to come back to, how do we support the leaders that you brought up earlier, that question, with an agile mindset, using disclosure first. So if I'm the leader and I say, I'm really having a hard time these last 3 weeks, my husband had COVID. Here's the things it was hard for me. This was rough, you guys. How about you? How have you been? How are you, what's going on with you? Well, if I have just brought everybody down to a level where they know that I just trusted enough to disclose something about myself that could be a little bit scary, then now they say, oh, I can do that too. Oh, I can do that too. Oh, I can do that too. And pretty soon you build that trust, right? So let's go back to, Rishita, that agile mindset that needs to exist when we are supporting our leaders in the workplace who are now doing something, or we're asking them to do something different than what they've been doing before. How can we support them, Rishita?
Well, actually, the best thing is to ask your leaders. Ask the leaders. So you as a leader, ask your teams, actually go back to the team and ask them how they need you to support them. Because what we want to move away is from this habits that we have. So in HR, as a HR leader to another leader, I'm not going to tell you what you need to do. I want to encourage you, and I want to build the right mindset and the right conditions in which I'm enabling you and encouraging you and teaching you actually how to go to your teams more often and to say, actually, you know what? I'm in this situation for the first time. I have never led through a pandemic. I haven't led a team through a pandemic. But also, interestingly, and that's something that we perhaps don't realize, is that before, when we were all in an office environment, we almost kind of assumed we had maybe 2 or 3 types of employees, right? Your permanent employees, your temporary employees, your contractors. But now we realize that the segmentation doesn't just mean temporary or permanent. We're now talking about individuals, humans. We have people out there who are carers, who are parents, and we have people who are now maybe on furlough. We have those who are being laid off. We have those that will stay behind. We have different people right now going through different things. And actually, you as a leader you have to move away from the one size fits all approach. But then how would you know what each of your people need from you if you don't ask them? And this is where equity comes in. Often we go from this mindset of equality. So I'm going to ask you the questions because I want to be equal to all of you. But actually, we're all not in the same place. So we don't want equality. We need equity. And you can only achieve that by asking each of your people what they need from you.
Well said. That is key. That's key. Okay, so now let me play devil's advocate. I did a talk in January where I had pretty much the same conversation in the talk. And one of the owners of a business said, oh, well, how can I possibly give every employee that I have exactly what they want? How can I manage to do that? What's your answer, Rishita?
I think that it's unfortunately, I would say that is not really what it's about. I think the sentiment of this question got lost on him. And that actually just shows that is like a little bit of emotional intelligence there. Because it's not about giving your employees what they want. It's about creating the right conditions in the environment for them to succeed. It's about being able to understand where they're coming from. I mean, I'll give you an example. One of the clients that I was working for earlier in the year when the pandemic started, and even though I'm a freelancer, she called me up and she said, listen, I understand that you have a family and you have 2 young children. And she said, is there anything that I can do to accommodate you as a parent and you as a consultant for us? That was just what she asked. And I said, actually, you know what, there is. Can I start my days earlier at 7 and finish at 11, have a break for lunch with my children, 11 till 12 or 1, and then continue afterwards and then log in later at night. So I'll make sure I'm available during the day for the team. And when it comes to, my own work, reporting, etc., I can do it later in the day. Done. Done deal. So this is what we expect from leaders, actually, is this understanding, this emotional intelligence. And as a leader, your job actually is to figure out, how can I bring my team together? So if everybody needs to have this kind of, flexibility, how can I ensure that I put in place moments of communication or times of communication? And where can I allow flexibility so that you can do the best that you need to be doing also for the other responsibilities that you have? So it's actually on you as a leader to ensure that you provide the right conditions for everybody to be able to work the best that they can.
Okay, that is brilliant. That is the best tip, ever, because that just summed it up so nicely. First of all, yes, going back to the owner that I was talking to, we had quite a few conversations during that talk where I was like, this is all about you. You're the problem here. Yes.
Exactly.
And it's very true. And so when you have, so I'm a leader in an organization, and this was a manufacturing company where the boss thinks the owner thinks this way. How can I then, as a leader who wants something different than what my owner understands, and I'm not trying to change his mindset because that's not my job and I've got enough to do, but I want to really make this a good working environment for my employees. Mm-hmm. How is a leader supposed to be supported in an environment like that? What can they do? You know what I mean? Just when things aren't in the culture the way that they want them to be.
So, when you're up against an owner or other peers, perhaps they don't feel or think the same way as you do, that is difficult. You can't really change that culture unless there is an agreement and buy-in from the entire leadership level, because it's got to be trickled down. And there has to be only a little bit of fear from, somebody in middle management or further down. Just that little bit of fear will stop people from actually opening up and being themselves and bringing their whole selves to work. So that is tricky. How you can change that? I wouldn't even know where to start. One of the things is, change happens at a local level. So for as long as you can, I would try and encourage that environment, yourself as a leader. And what happens often is that other leaders will start seeing the results, because it's usually what happens, right? It's that snowball effect. So somebody sees the difference, sees, that actual, hey, what is he doing? That's, resulting in that loyalty, that's resulting in that discretionary effort, that's resulting in that better communication, collaboration, because the results speak for themselves. And teams who have that safety, who have that trust, and have a leader that they can trust will show different results. And ultimately, other leaders will realize and will notice. And that's one way of doing it, is just, go ahead, do what you need to do. Sooner or later, people will come and ask, what is it that you're doing differently?
Yeah, I agree. You could just start. You can just start with some of these tips that Rishita's get some amazing, amazing nuggets in this episode that you could go take and do right now. Just to sit down, ask your employee what they need. How can I facilitate you better? If the employee says something simple like, I need my schedule to be like this, and you can accommodate that, how easy. Like, both of you walk away with a different understanding of things, right? So I do think that is a great tip, in that you can just get in there and get started. I think with that as well, it's going to teach that leader where they really want to be in life and what they really want out of their workplace. And sometimes we just get stuck in jobs just because we need to pay our bills. And what we don't realize is that our worth, our value is more than that. And what we bring to the table is a lot. And if we don't feel valued somewhere, or we're not in line with the culture, we grow out of it. And then you either become a really angry employee because it's like a bad marriage. I say it all the time. It's a relationship like a marriage, right? And you have to work at it, even at work. You have to work at it. You have to work out the relationships, your peers, your bosses, all of that, right? Mm-hmm. So I definitely think that just getting in and getting started, and then somebody else will see it and begin to say, hey, how come your employees are so productive? Or how come they're so happy? Or how come I've seen this happening? Well, let me show you. This is pretty easy. I'll just do this real quick. But I also think that it's going to place the true leaders in an organization up on another level, to where they're so seen, it's so evident of the difference between the way that the business is modeled and the actual leaders are doing things, that those leaders will probably find themselves in another job that's more supportive of what they're trying to do.
Absolutely.
So,
And often we have this idea that, we need to be grand, it needs to be big. And, we all have inherently individuals, humans, what motivates us, what drives us is to learn, to grow, to make an impact, becoming good at what we do. And that doesn't mean it has to be so big all the time. It doesn't have to be, organizational wide. It can just be also, what is the difference that you can make to those around you? And that can really bring some meaning into your work, into your job, if you can really reframe what is it that you do, and I wrote about this recently on LinkedIn, and I said, I started with the question, what do you do? When someone asks you, what do you do? How do you answer that? Do you say that I'm an HR executive or I'm an IT assistant? Do you say that, or do you talk about the meaning of what you do or the impact that you make? Because that's really a sure way of reframing what you do. And, and actually we can just ask ourselves a question every day as an employee to employee or peer to peer. How can I make your day today, better than when you came in? Or how can I make sure that you end your day better than when you came in? That's really kind of the questions that we can all ask each other within the organization. And that already will make a difference to how you feel.
Just hearing you say it makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I know it sounds funny, but it's true. Just to hear you say it, even though we're having this conversation, you're not asking me directly, emotions come up in me. I think, oh, yeah, okay, wow. So just being better stewards of connecting with other people in the workplace in general would be an amazing thing to do. Now, you talked about emotional intelligence a little bit. I'm going to plug in here real quick that our next conversation with Scott Sadler will be about emotional intelligence and mindset. So we'll talk about what that really means, because people are very confused about what emotional intelligence means or how to even begin to obtain it, because it is something that everybody has the ability, not everybody naturally has, but we all have the ability to learn it, right? So Look forward to that episode. Now, this is all so much good stuff. I mean, we could talk forever, Rishita, and actually I'd love to have you back on the podcast again so we could dive even deeper into some of these things. Or, maybe you're really passionate about something that's going on that you're teaching. Just hit me up. I'd love to have you back again. But this was great. This is good stuff here. So with that said, in closing, is there anything that you think needed to be said that we did not say today?
I think really one of the things I'd like to highlight is, to all leaders out there, what is your organizational telling you? What are your employees telling you? What are the numbers telling you? And if I just bring some very high level numbers worldwide, it will just also give you an indication of the state of the workplace, today. So, companies are investing over $720 million a year on employee engagement initiatives. Yet, according to Gallup, employee engagement figures are at a staggeringly low of 15% globally. And what's more, it's costing companies roughly $550 billion on productivity losses each year. So something is not quite right here. And as much as we, in HR or as leaders, we have good, we basically, our leadership practices are actually failing to make the impact that we seek to make. So right now, as leaders, we need to re-examine our processes to reduce complexity and increase agility to ensure that we can meet the needs of our customers much faster. So that is my call to action for every single leader, whether you're in HR, whether you're in legal, whether you're in the business. Really look at your processes, look at what's happening in your business and reduce that complexity to the minimum viable product. Really bring it, scale it back, make it simple. And so that everything can start flowing and communicating again.
I love it. Scale that product back. Vertical slice that up until you can't chop it up anymore. Because that's really, going back to waterfall, right? So we're always looking for that big finished product. And in product here, we could be talking about people, employees, programs, any of that, right? Breaking that down to the smallest and easiest, most possible.
And also, and what is the minimum? We often want to put more. We want to layer it. We want to cater for the worst offender, which is probably just the 1%, and we suddenly put everything really watertight. But actually, what is the minimum? The minimum valuable product, as I put it in HR, minimum valuable product, and keep it at that. And then the rest, let it go.
Hey, minimum valuable product right now could be just asking somebody the questions that we talked about today. That's pretty minimum. Absolutely. And you're going to get something out of the end of it. You'll start to get your employees to feel that they can trust themselves to be more vulnerable And when their employees are more vulnerable and they can share with you what their needs are, the whole business, then it all falls in line. Things start to happen that you're like, I didn't know that would happen if I just let somebody have their own schedule. Who knew? So that's a really good example as well. So Rishita, thank you so much today for being on the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. You've given us some amazing examples and ideas of things that anybody who's listening right now can take right back to the workplace and begin to implement, which I'm all about. What can we do today? Go right back, take it. So thank you so much for being on with us today, Rishita. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful.
You are so welcome. This is the close of the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. Please check the show notes for the links to how to get a hold of Rishita, how to connect with her, and all of her resources that we shared in the show. Please remember to share this episode with someone that will benefit from it. This is Kimberly Ficklin, your host, wishing you a happy, healthy day. That's a wrap for today. The Happy Healthy Workplace podcast is now complete. Be sure to subscribe and join us weekly for secrets, solutions, or strategies that help you create a profitable business where people really want to work. This is Kimberly Ficklin, wishing you a happy, healthy day.